My mother has always been the overbearing type. But I made the biggest mistake maybe ever when I told her, "Yeah, Mom, you can help me plan my wedding." Well, little did I know, she would take my biggest day ever and make it my biggest nightmare. She ruined my wedding, and I'll tell you exactly how she did it. And the worst part about it, she shows up in a white wedding dress.
Me and my husband recently got married. Our wedding day, which was supposed to be a lovely evening, signified our love, turned into an absolute disaster. You see, the disaster was actually created and caused by my own mother. After my disastrous wedding, I ended up deciding to cut her off. Now, before you call me heartless or irrational, let me explain the story of how I even got to that decision. I'm 27 and female and have been engaged to my long-term boyfriend Ethan for a few months now. We have a super busy and occupied with wedding planning and our dream wedding. I have been dreaming about my wedding since I was a little girl. My grandmother used to be one of the best wedding planners in our hometown before she retired a few years back. So, I grew up seeing all different types of weddings because I would always tag along with her. Luckily, Ethan is very understanding and has been allowing me to be in charge of most of the planning. He jokes around that this is, quote, my wedding, and he just has to show up and be handsome. So, today I went to go view a wedding venue, and unfortunately, Ethan could not make it because of work. I met the owner of the venue at the entrance of this beautiful botanical garden, and we decided that we want an outdoor wedding. While the owner is busy giving me a tour of the venue, a loud, squeaky voice yells, "Hello." I could recognize that voice from a mile away. I mean, it's a voice I've been hearing for the past 27 years, my mother Janet. She's walking towards us with a huge grin on her face, and I don't know, she has her short blonde hair tied in a scruffy bun and is dressed up in a cute knee-length maxi dress. I give her a little smile and wonder what she is doing here. She'd asked me if she could come with me whenever I go venue viewing, but I told her that I would prefer to do it alone or with Ethan. My mother is very over the top, especially with her taste and opinions, while I'm more reserved and to myself, hence why I was thinking of having a small intimate garden wedding. The owner continues with tour, but my mother interrupts it by asking her, does she know any fancy hall venues nearby? I tell my mother that I don't want a hall wedding, I want a garden wedding. And she immediately frowns. She tells me that's the worst wedding idea she's ever heard, and the owner defends my idea by telling my mother that the garden weddings are very popular these days, especially because of the beautiful photos that the wedding photographs can take. After viewing the venue, we head out to have a light lunch at a nearby cafe. So here's the background story about me and my mother's relationship. She had me when she was very young, and my father left when I was a baby, so I don't remember him at all. My mother raised me with my grandmother. Even with all the help she got from my grandma, I still feel that she resents me for stopping her dreams. Which isn't true, because it's not like I asked to be born, right? My mother was a drama student at an art college, and when I was younger, she would tell me stories about how she would always just get the lead female roles. She would brag to me about how her lectures told her she was destined to be a successful actress, which is what she wanted to be. Well, until she had me, then my grandmother told her to drop out of art school and go study for a real qualification so that she could get a stable job. That would help provide. So my mother chose to study accounting and graduated. She's an accountant at a small firm and has been working there for years. Well, I did not follow in her footsteps of wanting to be an actress. Instead, I decided to study law. I went to a law school, and now I'm currently working at one of the biggest law firms in the country, which was my dream. I know background stories can be boring, but I just had to give you guys an understanding as to why my mother acts the way that she does. I'm a constant reminder that she did not get to follow her dreams while I am living mine, which is why she has so much resentment towards me. Anyways, me and my mother are at the cafe waiting for our food and drinks. She starts talking about her boyfriend Mark and mentions that he wants them to go on an international trip. I shake my head, and it's a slight frown because she knows that I don't like her boyfriend. My mother's been dating this guy called Mark. One of the reasons I don't like him is firstly, he's 18 years younger than my mother, which is just weird. Another reason is that he does not work and practically lives off my mom. But she's always making excuses for him to not work, which I didn't understand. She continues to tell me that Mark has been bringing up the topic of marriage. I tell her that's ridiculous, and I hope that she just isn't considering it. She tells me to stop being so jealous because Ethan's boring. I roll my eyes at her and whisper under my breath that at least my man has a job. We got our drinks and food and ask me when is my next wedding venue viewing. I act like I did not hear her and ask her when she last talked to Grandma. She immediately rolls her eyes and starts to rant about how grandmother is such a joy killer. Well, I'd rather listen to her complain about grandmother than talk about my wedding with her any day of the week. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story has 4 updates, and yeah, it's a pretty intense one between a mother and daughter. I hope you guys are having a great day. Let's jump into update number 1. It's been a week since I last saw my mother, and today is my final dress fitting. I had decided to invite my mother since I did not want my bridesmaids to see my dress. Only because I want them to be surprised when they see me in my dress. I'm waiting for her at the boutique, and after 30 minutes she finally arrives. She does not even apologize for being late, but that's how she is. I go inside the changing room with one of the boutique sales assistants so she can help me with the dress. I absolutely love it. It was made for me. I remember trying it on for the first time and it fit like a glove. I can't wait for my mother to see me in my dress. This will be her first time seeing me in it, and I walk out the dressing room to show my mother, well, only to find her not there. I call out to her and she responds. I realize that her voice is coming from another changing room, and what could she possibly be doing in there? After a few moments, she comes out of the changing room and I am gobsmacked. She does a little twirl and asks me, how does she look? This woman is dressed in a wedding dress. I mean, it is not similar to my dress at all, but why on earth is she trying on wedding dresses at my dress fitting? I tell her that she looks beautiful, but she needs to take off that dress because this is my dress fitting for my actual wedding. She rolls her eyes and tells me to calm down. She just wants to get a few ideas. I glare at her and ask her why she would need her wedding dress and why she would need wedding dress ideas. Her response is stupid, but I just bite my tongue because I don't want to be rude. She responded that she's thinking of wedding dress ideas just in case Mark decides to pop the question. Clearly, she can't see that I'm upset. I asked the sales assistant to please help me get out of my dress. I'm doing my best to fight back tears, but I'm so annoyed with her. I get out of my dress and go straight to the reception. I look over and see that my mother is still in the wedding dress, and I tell the sales manager my dress is perfect, and that they should deliver it when it's ready, and I walk out the boutique without even saying goodbye. Update number 2. So 2 weeks have passed since, well, my horrible dress fitting. When I told my fiancé about it, he wasn't shocked by my mother's actions. He was always just feeling that my mother's envious of the life that I have, because she feels that she should have this life too. He also told me that I should not let my mother ruin this for me because of her self-hatred and selfish tendencies, so I've decided to take his advice and have continued with the wedding planning. I received a call from my mother while I was at work. She's asking if we can meet up for an early dinner because she wants to apologize. It makes me happy that she wants to apologize because she hardly ever does. I tell her that unfortunately, I can't meet up with her for dinner, but she is free. I could meet her in 20 minutes for lunch. She agrees, and I tell her where to meet me, and when I get to the restaurant, I find my mother already seated and drinking a glass of wine. I greet her with a hug, and she gives me a sweet smile. We order some food, and we start catching up on what's been going on in our lives, and she asks me how is wedding planning going, and I admit to her that I've been struggling to find a venue. She puts her hand on my shoulder and asks me to at least think about the wedding venue at the hall. I tell her that I really do want a garden wedding, and she just proceeds to rub my shoulder and tells me that she knows a very beautiful hall venue. Well, I just take a bite from my chicken wrap and start thinking about my mother's suggestion. She asks me to at least just view it, and if I don't like it, then fine. After thinking about it for a few minutes, I nod my head and tell her that we can go check it out. Well, she claps her hands with excitement and tells me that I will definitely love it. I smile at her and tell her that I'm glad that we're getting along. She also gives me a sweet smile and tells me that she's happy for me. She apologizes to me about the dress fitting incident and just explains that she got extremely excited when Mark started bringing up marriage. She continues to explain that she may have overdone it because no man has ever considered marrying her, and her self-esteem got damaged when my father left. I have so much sympathy for my mom. I can't imagine how devastated and heartbroken she must have felt when my father decided to just up and leave. I rub my mother on the back and tell her, I understand. We should just leave that incident in the past. I received a message from my mother last night after our lunch, and she told me that she managed to get a viewing at the venue hall. She's been telling me about it, and I asked her when, and she told me that, the viewing for today, which shocked me, but since I promised I'd go check it out, I told her that I would meet her there. Luckily, I had no meetings, so my schedule was flexible for the day. While I'm getting ready, Ethan comes to say goodbye, and I kiss his cheek, and he tells me to enjoy the venue viewing with my mom. I'm grateful that he didn't say anything negative about this, but I had to explain to him that me and my mom are starting on a new, fresh page. I get to the venue, and I can just tell from the entrance that this venue is definitely over the top. It has a royal castle type of theme, which is not really my style, but I'm keeping an open mind about it, and, I don't know, I find my mother standing with a man. She waves at me enthusiastically with a huge smile on her face, and the man standing next to my mother is the manager of this castle venue, and he gives us a grand tour. I'm not really feeling it, but my mom was loving every minute of it, especially the reception hall. After we're done with the tour, the manager tells us that this venue does get booked up quickly, so if we want it, we better book it fast. I say thank you, and let him know that we'll need time to think about it, and he just walks off, leaving just me and my mother. Well, she asks me what I think about the venue, and I tell her it's not really my style. Not something I envisioned as my wedding venue. She frowns, but then tells me that we can view other venues since I'm struggling to find one, and we drive back to my place and continue discussing the wedding. I confide in her that planning this whole wedding by myself is extremely stressful, especially because Ethan can only do so much with his busy, demanding work schedule. I continue telling her that work's been hectic and trying to balance everything is giving me so much anxiety. She just rubs my back and tells me that she can only imagine how stressed I can be. She suggests that why don't I give her my wedding planning book so that she can help me out with the planning a bit. I glare at her. I don't give her an immediate answer, of course. She chuckles a little bit and assures me that she'll strictly follow exactly what the planning book says. She just wants to strictly help me out because she can tell that I'm really overwhelmed. She also promises me that before she makes a final decision on something, she will double-check and confirm it with me, which gives me a little motivation I need to agree to her suggestion. I get up and give her my white planner book, which has everything that I want for the wedding, from the venue to the flowers to the cake, you name it. I tell her that she has to strictly abide by everything inside this planner, and she gives me her word that she'll do just that. It's the evening, and I'm telling Ethan all about what happened today. Once I mentioned that my mother offered to help me out with the planning, he sighs deeply and just starts shaking his head. He tells me that's a horrible idea and makes the suggestion of rather using a wedding planner. I tell him that finding a wedding planner, it's going to be expensive, honey, and hard, especially because our wedding date is nearby. He tells me that he hopes that it just doesn't backfire and ends up hurting me at the end. I tell him to stop being such a negative Nancy and to have a bit more faith in my mother. He gives me one last glare and just shrugs his shoulders before heading upstairs to go freshen up. Update number 3. Hey guys. Well, it's my wedding day and it's already started on a sour note. According to my mom, no garden venues were meeting the standards and criteria I set in my planning book, so I decided to settle with the hall venue. Not the castle, though, that I viewed with my mom, thank goodness. This venue was at least simple and elegant, which still matched my vision, and I'm in the dressing room with my bridesmaids getting ready. I have not seen anything because I've been so busy, but my mother had been keeping me up to date with everything, so I'm not really worried. My maid of honor tells me that it's time for me to put on my dress. I look at the time and it's almost time for the wedding to start, but my mother still is not here. I wonder where she is, and I ask my bridesmaids if they've seen my mother, and they all shake their heads. My maid of honor sees the worry on my face and tells me to relax. Maybe mother's busy making sure everything's going according to plan. Well, I sigh out of relief. Yes, that's exactly what she must be doing, since she was technically the wedding planner. I put on my dress and my girlfriends all admire it, and I look at myself in the mirror and smile at my reflection. I truly do look like a beautiful bride. I can't wait for Ethan and all my guests to see me. As we head downstairs, because all the guests should be seated by now because it's time for the bridesmaids to walk down the aisle. While I was fixing my veil, I hear my bridesmaids gasp in shock, and one of them literally said out loud, "What the hell is she doing?" I immediately turn around and get the shock of my life. There's my mother, dressed in a white wedding dress with her arm hooked into Mark's arm. I stare at her in shock, and she gives me a big smile and waves at my girlfriends. My maid of honor pulls my mother back, and my mother just slaps at her hand. She tells my mom that she needs to go change. It's disrespectful to wear white at a wedding, especially your own darn daughter's. Mark tells her to back off and focus on herself. Well, my mother just smirks. They enter the room, and we can hear the shocked reaction of the guest. I mean, everybody was like, "What's going on?" I want to run off and go cry in a room because this is flat out embarrassing. How dare she show up in a white wedding dress? And not just any dress, a whole darn wedding dress. The song that my bridesmaids are meant to walk down to starts playing, and they all look at me and ask if they should still walk. I tell them, go ahead. Yes, they can walk down the aisle, because there isn't anything we can do. Also, Ethan's groomsmen are inside waiting for the ladies so they can walk them down the aisles together, and I refuse to allow her to ruin my special day. They nod their head and start walking down the aisle. My maid of honor is doing her best to comfort me and remind me not to cry, otherwise I will ruin the makeup. Well, everything feels ruined. It's time for me to walk down the aisle, so I stop, collect myself, take a deep breath, and open the door to walk. I look around and can tell that the guests are still a little bit shocked about my mother's attire, but I notice that the room is not decorated any way I wanted. I specifically told my mother, I want only yellow, white, and orange flowers, but instead it was blue, purple, and white, which does not match the bouquets that my bridesmaids are carrying. Oh gosh, the flower arrangements are just looking too tacky. I do my best to smile while I walk down the aisle. I can see that Ethan is fuming with anger, and I finally reach the end of the aisle and the ceremony begins. The ceremony did go well, at least. I decided to focus my attention on just me and Ethan. remembering that today is our day and it's about us. Not even my mother's evil tactics could ruin this. We're now all heading to the reception, and guess what? Just when I thought my mother could not be any more selfish, she just proved that she can. My dream reception was nowhere in sight. She had decorated the reception in her tacky, ugly, over-the-top style, and I tell Ethan that I need to go to the bathroom, and he says he'll come with me. We reach the hallway at the bathroom, and I just start crying my lungs out, and my mother had turned my special day into her special day, which did I believe her for even 1 second? Why? Ethan hugs me tight and tells me that it's going to be okay. This is still our wedding day, and we should try our best to enjoy it. I eventually settle down and stop crying and tell him that I will find him in the reception hall. He nods and walks off. I go inside the bathroom, clean myself up since some of the makeup is now smudged because of the crying. I look myself in the mirror and I still look like a beautiful bride. I need to just forget about my mother and enjoy myself, my special day. I'm officially a Mrs. now. When I'm about to leave the bathroom, one of my aunts walk in. I greet her and she greets me back, and she tells me that I look beautiful and I thank her. She comments on how the reception hall's decorated, and she says that she was not aware that me and my mother had similar taste. As I'm about to explain to her, well, what happened? She proceeds to tell me that my mother has, cleared everything up. I ask her what had my mother cleared up, and she responds by saying that my mother had explained to most of the guests that the reason why she was dressed up in a wedding dress was because this is a double wedding, actually. I ask her, wait a second, can you please repeat what you just said because I'm confused? She tells me that my mother has been telling everybody that this is me and her double wedding, hence why she's also wearing a wedding dress. And after my aunt repeats herself, all I see is red. I push her out the way, and I head towards the reception hall. Ethan rushes up to me, and I tell him to go fetch my mother. He doesn't ask why, he just immediately goes. Update number 4. This is the final update. You will not believe the excuse that my mother gave me. Ethan went to go fetch my mom, who was busy entertaining my guests but acting like they were her. He came back with her, and I asked him to please give us a bit of space. He says okay and walks off. I tell my mother that we're going outside to have a serious conversation, and she then responds by telling me she can't leave her guests. What type of host would make her? Her response fuels my anger a bit, and I just grab her arm and pull her outside into the hall. Once we get to the hallway, I just give her a death stare. I ask her, why does she hate me so much? Is it because I remind her of her failed dreams that now she wants to ruin my life? She gasped in shock and tells me that I'm being dramatic. I tell her that she's ruined my wedding and that she's turned my whole special day into her special day, which is so selfish. She tells me that at least I got a classy wedding, unlike the boring one I had wanted. It took everything inside me not to slap her because she clearly does not see any wrong in what she's done. I tell her that she's a psycho for going around telling people that this is a double wedding when Mark does not even want to marry her. She yells at me to shut up, and I tell her that she's stupid to believe that a man almost half her age would want to marry her. I proceed to tell her that Mark is only with her for money, nothing else, it's obvious. And after I say that to her, I notice that she's getting teary, and I ask, oh, what's wrong? She tells me that she can't believe that I'm being this mean. I roll my eyes at her and tell her that this is nothing. She calls me a selfish pig and tells me that she and Mark are going to get married because she's going to propose to him. I stare at her in disgust. Isn't it bad enough that she ruined my wedding, came to my wedding in a stupid wedding dress, and now she wants to propose to her boy toy? Basically, she used me and Ethan to pay for her stupid proposal, and this was her plan all along. She was never genuinely sorry for ruining my dress fitting. She never wanted to just help me with the planning. She just wanted me to fund her stupid proposal. I tell her that she is such a selfish cow, and I want nothing to do with her. She laughs and tells me to stop being so dramatic, and I tell her no, I'm serious. She's too toxic and does not respect me. I tell her that she and Mark have to leave. She looks at me and just starts hysterically laughing. I ignore her because I can see that she thinks I'm joking. I go back into the reception hall, find Ethan, and tell him to call security because I want my mother and her boy toy escorted out. He immediately rushes off to fetch security. I walk over to Mark and tell him that Ethan has gone to fetch security to escort him out. So he has a choice. He can either get my mother and walk out of here without causing a scene, or security's going to drag them out. He ignores me, and I see my mother walk back in here with her head held high. I see that she's walking towards the microphone stand, probably wanting to make a speech. Luckily, I don't have to stop her because Ethan walks in with security and they immediately go towards her and Mark. They first politely ask them to leave, but my mother refuses, so they take their arms and escort them out. Everyone's watching my mother make a fool of herself, because while they are escorting her out, she's screaming insults at me at the top of her lungs, but hey, I don't care. I just don't. As long as she's out of here, I apologize to my guest and explain everything to them. After explaining and apologizing, I decided to enjoy what's left of the wedding day/evening and end up having a blast. The next day, I received a phone call from Grandma, informing me that after my mother and Mark had been escorted out, Mark broke up with my mom. I'm not shocked at all. She continues to tell me that the reason he gave my mother for breaking up with her was that she had embarrassed him in front of all of her family, and he just can't continue the relationship. I just laugh because it clearly shows that he had been looking for a way out of the relationship and he used this incident to do it. Well, I did warn her about him. After talking to my grandmother, I see that my mother had sent me a text, and I read the text and it literally says this. You're such a jealous cow. You ruined my relationship. He never would have dumped me if you would have just been kind enough to share your day. He even rejected my proposal because he says that he can't be a stepfather to such a selfish child. I hate you. After reading that text, I just deleted and blocked my mother's number. Hey, I even blocked her on Facebook. I refuse to allow such toxicity to continue in my life, especially my married life. No daughter deserves to have her special day ruined by a selfish, toxic mother. I have not spoken to my mother ever since that day, and believe me when I say that life has been peaceful without her. Thank you for listening.
Alright guys, what an absolute nightmare. I just want to ask you guys, if you were in this position and your mother shows up at your dream wedding, the one that she helped you plan, and everything's different, and then all of a sudden you find out she's wearing a white wedding dress, and she says she's getting married to her boy toy on my special day. Do you guys take the same route that OP did? Basically, kicking out her mother and kicking out the boyfriend as well, or do you just allow them to stay and say, you know what, forget about it? And the last question is, do you think OP is ultimately responsible for her mother and boyfriend breaking up? Drop your comments down below. Let's talk about it. You guys have a fantastic day. I will see you in the next story. See ya!